Hi Josh, good to see you on this hot day. Nice to be connected again.
I know. Nice to see you too. I'm excited to chat with you.
Yeah, so this is kind of like chats that we might have offline. We're recording them so we can both share what we're kind of thinking about, how we're seeing this online business world with our mutual audiences. So for the benefit of anyone who doesn't know me yet, I'm Ellen Donnelly. I run the Ask and Authority Club. And I'm a coach, first and foremost, a business coach, and I help people kind of step into their power from a like internal direction, motivation perspective in the business world, and then own their unique voice and message around their ideas. And yeah, Josh and I connected probably at the start of my business journey, certainly not at yours. And have sort of followed each other ever since. One of my favorite newsletter creators and just like a mentor from afar. You're over in the Valley. So yeah, would love
hmm
to get your intro for everyone as well.
Sure. Hello. For anyone who doesn't know me, I'm a content strategist, and basically, I help people get more clients from their content. So, essentially, what that means is I found that there are a lot of people putting a lot of time, effort, and resources into publishing content on social platforms, on podcasts, on YouTube, in newsletters, on blogs, all over the place. And in most cases, what they really want out of it is leads or clients or sales or some sort of impact goal. And in a lot of cases, they're not getting nearly as much of that as they could. That they might be getting some likes, they might be getting some followers, but they're not really getting the return on the investment that they're putting into it. And so I help people figure out how to increase that return on the investment that they're making in content. And in most cases, I found that what they're really missing is just some strategic stuff, right? That they don't need to produce, in most cases, more content, more time, more effort, more money, any of that. They just need to get better and more strategic at how they're doing it. So that's what I help people figure out how to do. I do that in a few different ways. One, I have a free newsletter called For the Interested, which people can check out at fortheinterested.com/subscribe. I have a podcast called Clients from Content, which is wherever you get your podcasts. And I have a membership program called the Clients from Content membership, through which I do a series of what I call skill sessions, which are 1 hour sort of video trainings on specific things like how to grow a newsletter and how to get clients and how to create products and that kind of thing. And then I also do monthly office hours calls where members can come on, ask me whatever they want, and I give them sort of one-on-one help there. So that, in a nutshell, is what I do.
Amazing. Yeah, you're kind of all over the internet in the best way possible, at least on my end of the internet.
hmm
And maybe that's a good place to start, like that idea of strategic content.
hmm
We both share a similar customer profile, I think, which is like a small business owner, likely bootstrap, likely running a service-based business where they're trying to get clients, likely without big team, big budget. What does strategic content look like in 2025? We can both answer, but does anything jump out for you?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, I think well, first of all, it's really important to understand what your goal is, right? So content, social media, newsletter, all this stuff, it's not a goal in itself, right? The goal is not to quote unquote grow an audience. And now that will help you achieve your goal in some cases, but it's not just more followers, it's not just more impressions, it's not, it's not any of that stuff. So understanding what you actually want to accomplish, right? I want to get clients or I want to get sales or I'm a nonprofit promoting some cause and I want people to take this action. Like you need to understand what your goal is separate from these content platforms, right? Then you're going to reverse engineer and you go, well, how can I use content? How can I create content to accomplish that goal? And it's really important to understand that a lot of the metrics that people use to judge their content are the metrics that the algorithm cares about or that the platforms care about, which is not necessarily what you actually care about. So, for example, if you have a newsletter with 10,000 subscribers that gets you two clients, that is not as valuable as a newsletter with 100 subscribers that gets you 20 clients if your goal is clients. Those will be constructed in completely different ways. And yet, everyone who starts a newsletter is like, how do I get more subscribers? How do I get more subscribers? And a lot of times, I'll have this conversation with someone who, depending on what they do, they're like, I'd be like, how many clients could you work with in a year? And they'd be like 20. Like, well, why do you need 10,000 newsletter subscribers? Why is that a goal? Like your goal is clients, right? So when I talk about strategic content, that's what I mean, that you are approaching your content in a way that it is designed to accomplish a goal separate from sort of just views or followers or that kind of thing, which
Yeah.
seems obvious, and yet most people don't do it.
It's so obvious when you step down to think about it, but we're so bombarded with like success metrics and shiny
Mm-hmm.
object syndrome that it's hard to sort of do that in internal filter. And even I, but I'm a
Mm-hmm.
business coach. I think about this stuff all day. I love learning about this stuff. Even I get confused sometimes. I'm like, am I
Yeah.
building a coaching business? Am I building a content business? I remember one of my first ever goals when I set out was to have a coaching and a content business. But the more I
Mm-hmm.
learn, it's like they're pulling me in different paths, different
Mm-hmm.
KPIs. And so if I reconcile that and choose a lane, let's say I choose the coaching lane,
Yeah.
which I am, I'm pretty certain of that. It's like exactly to your point, I don't need the big shiny 10,000 or
Yeah.
100,000 subscriber number. I do believe that you need volume in order to reach your
Mm-hmm.
goals if you have a scalable business model. And this is where it gets like more complicated, right?
Yeah.
You and I are both able to work with more than 20 people a year,
Mm-hmm.
maybe even more than 100 a year. I don't know what your client roster
Yeah.
looks like, but I'm now at the point where it's like 50 to 80 to 100 potentially per year. I don't want it to be much more than that. It's a lot of people
Mm-hmm.
to have in my brain.
Yeah.
But I certainly see scale as like the goal. And therefore, you do need scale somewhere to get that.
Mm-hmm.
And I've never done paid ads, but I think that could be a way to get there.
Mm-hmm.
How have you sort of like, yeah, reconciled the growth versus the client
Yeah.
piece?
So I think, first of all, I should say that it there is overlap, right? So I'm not saying like, oh, there's no reason you should, I'm not saying like, oh, it's a bad thing to have 10,000 subscribers or whatever, right? I have 32,000 subscribers to my newsletter. I've been writing my newsletter for about 9 years now, which is crazy. That's super helpful, right? I'm able to do a lot of things because I have 32,000 subscribers that I couldn't do if I had 3,000 subscribers. But the key is I have 32,000 of, for the most part, the right subscribers who align with my goal. And the other key is that I don't, while it helps my business, I don't necessarily need it for my business. I could have a successful business without 30,000 subscribers and have, right? Again, I didn't always have 30,000 subscribers. So I think the key, that's when I say strategic. It's not that, depending on what your business is and what you're selling, there are businesses and there are goals where absolutely it makes sense to have a bigger audience, right? If you were, for example, if a core part of your business was, let's say, advertising and sponsorships, and you're targeting advertisers who want a significant amount of reach, then there is a yeah, you need to grow your audience, right? If you have a product, so for example, the way my membership is structured, uh, it is a completely scalable model, right? So what I do in the membership is once every 2 months, I do a new skill session, again, video presentation training. And then once a month, I do office hours calls, and who members can show up and ask me questions. That is my total time commitment, aside from dealing with logistical stuff. That is my total time commitment for the membership. So it doesn't matter if I have 20 members or 400 members, or, I'm at about 400 members right now, right? If that number goes to 4,000, if that were to 10x, I don't really have that much additional work except for a little logistical stuff. I'm still doing one skill session every 2 months and one office hours calls. Maybe if there were more members, I would add a second office hours calls just so I could
Maybe
deal with,
five
deal.
more at
Right, right.
4,000.
So
Yeah.
it could add a little bit. But what that means is, with that model, it makes sense for me to grow and have a bigger audience because it's not going to lead to a lot of additional work. It's just going to lead to more revenue. With a different model, so for example, if you were doing more high touch consulting or more of a sort of small cohort thing where it's like, okay, well, I can only work with 10 people at a time, 20 people at a time, whatever it is, it's less important to have this massive audience because I can only work with 20 at a time with that model. So one of the reasons why I've chosen the model I've chosen is because it has that scalability. which also enables me to charge lower prices, which I know we're going to talk about at some point as well. But so that's the other big piece of strategy and audience growth is really alignment, right? So you need your approach to content, to audience growth, to all of that kind of stuff needs to be aligned with the actual business model that you're building. And that's another area where I see a lot of people where it's misaligned, right? Where it's like they can only work with so many people, but they're spending all their time trying to grow a bigger audience, right? Or they have a business where it's like, you know, they're selling a $10, all they're selling is a $10 product, and they're doing something that's not going to attract enough. They need a big audience because if they're only going to sell, you know, that kind of thing. So alignment is a key piece of this as well.
Yeah, and if we think about the kind of ingredients for
Mm,
alignment, you've touched on some. The price of the product is an obvious one. How many do you need
mm,
to sell to reach your revenue goal? If it's 100K and it's a $10 product, you know, what is that, 10,000? But point being,
yeah.
you need to have scale in mind from the get-go. I think the other inputs to that equation are like personal interests, personal
Hmm.
goals. I've found a lot of value fulfillment from the one-to-one work where you
Hmm.
deeply impact somebody there and then slash after the session. And so for me to explore moving to a completely scalable, like low touch, high volume model, I think
Hmm.
I'd lose a lot of that fulfillment along the way. And for those
Yep.
people who maybe haven't really learned enough yet, I think a good way is to experiment with different stuff.
Yep.
It's not just about how big is your audience, it's also about what do you need to earn to like pay your bills, what's achievable for you. Like
Hmm.
certain people are not that inclined to do, I don't know, the content required at scale to build a big
Hmm.
audience, whereas other people it comes much more naturally. So um yeah,
I think also, can I just jump in on what you said there?
yeah,
Because I think it's really important, and I think we're a great example of this because again, we have sort of similar audiences, but we're approaching the business in a different way. And I think it's really important to point out to everyone that you can succeed in any of these approaches, right? And I also think it's really important to like you said, to build the business of like, what is the type of work that you want to do, right? Do you enjoy the high touch one-on-one stuff? If that's what you want to do, that's going to lead to you needing to charge. Again, this is the alignment piece, right? I want to do this kind of work for these kind of people. That means I need to package it up and the business model needs to be in a certain way, which then leads to all the other decisions that you need to make, right? And the truth is, again, you can succeed working with, you know, I had somebody I was talking to the other day, and they have he works with 10 clients a year. That's it. He has a newsletter, I think, of 100,000 people.
wow,
He has a best-selling book. He works with 10 clients, and he said like half of them are professional athletes and half of them are business CEOs, and that's it. So
amazing.
he was like, and the people I'm getting, it's very high end, super high ticket, whatever. He's like, the truth is, they're not really going to come to me through my newsletter. Now he has some lower tier products to monetize, you know, and again, he sells books, he's a best selling book and whatever. So there are other things where he's monetizing sort of, you know, that broader audience. But from a pure client perspective, he's like, look, you know, he's getting clients from referrals and word of
Word of
mouth
mouth
and you
entirely,
know and
probably.
that kind of thing, and there's no space for, he can't work with more people than that, and he's not looking to it. So but he understands that, right? And so he understands the content in the newsletter is to attract ultimately people that are going to buy his books or maybe book him to do some speaking gigs or whatever. So again, being strategic about that, he's not, but if he was only going to work with those 10 people and not do anything else, he doesn't need a newsletter with 100,000. What's the point, right? Unless he just happens to want to do
Right.
that. So again, you can succeed in that way. And then there's other people who, you know, they just sell a low ticket product and they've structured their business that way. So it's a matter of deciding what you want to, you know, how you want to approach it, who you want to work with, and then really importantly, aligning and being strategic and all the rest of the pieces to match that.
Yeah, I like what you said there about it's about deciding, which sounds so obvious, but we can decide
Mm-hmm.
in this kind of purest way. Like I am building this type of business model, this kind of like author based, where books are the primary engine, but
Mm-hmm.
maybe there's this like business on the back end, or I'm building this like high touch or cohort based or mastermind or scale. And then if you want to add like uh, things around the edges as adjacent because of
Mm-hmm.
fun or to cover costs or to
Yep.
sort of serve a need that maybe the core business isn't serving, then great. But the simplicity component of like knowing which business you're operating and what success looks like, that needs to be decided. And I'm saying this almost to myself at this point, because these
Mhm.
things get confusing over the years. You try stuff, suddenly you add things, and then you're kind of trying to win
Yep.
almost these different races, competing against yourself from an
Yeah,
energy.
well, you see opportunities everywhere, and you're like, I could do this and I could do that. And this is, I think, the other really important part that I talk to people a lot when they're sort of trying to figure out their businesses. And this is, I think, where that decision sometimes they go wrong or they get sort of tripped up is, that I believe that decision should be based on what you are most excited to do, not on what you think is most likely to succeed.
Yeah.
So I see this all the time where people are like, this seems like the easier path, or this seems like based on what I have and based on what I've done, the more likely to succeed, or the less likely to fail. And I believe that that is a recipe for trouble. That I think when you're looking at it, you should look at it and go, I always tell people, I do this exercise with clients and I'll be like, let's assume success. So you're looking at A, B, C, different business model, let's say, or different types of offer or clients or whatever. And if I told you today that all three were going to be equally successful,
You can
so
all get
whatever it is, right?
whatever
You say like, okay, I want to make $1 million a year. Great. I tell you all three of these
and do that.
are going you're going to get to $1 million a year. Which do you choose?
Hmm.
And I think that hypothetical exercise helps people sort of ignore that this is more likely to succeed. They go, well, if that were true, and they might even go, well, but it's not, this is more likely and this is easier. I'm like, no, no, no. Let's just pretend you can get to your $1 million a year or whatever you want with any of these three. What are you going to choose? And they'd be like, oh, I would choose that because I really like working high touch with one-on-one people. Or I would choose that because I really, don't want to work high touch with I don't want to have to do meetings and whatever it is, whatever the model is,
Right.
right?
Meetings,
Um,
deadlines, all the things.
Right. And so then, once they sort of choose that, I say, okay, now let's figure out what a plan would look like to make that work. Because I really fundamentally believe, number one, I think that you are going to be whatever's going to be quote unquote easiest or most likely to succeed is going to be the thing that you are most excited to the work you're most excited to do. So that in of itself, like you're going the direction that you want to go, you now have a massive competitive advantage sort of over going the other paths. And I also believe that it's kind of true. Like you can succeed with any of these methods. So why not try to go after the one that you most want as opposed to the one that you just think is least likely to fail, which
Yeah.
is just a guess anyway.
It's a guess. And then doing that analysis on your own or with a coach
Mhm.
or whatever, and then just sticking with it for a while.
Mhm.
Like that's the hard bit. It's like the
Yeah.
dip, as Seth Godin calls it, and staying in that hard of all of those lanes are hard, right? They all come with their
Mhm.
own challenges that you don't see until you're in. And then it's like staying through. But I was very like curious to watch unfold. Was it last year you sharing your experiences actually working with
Mhm.
a business coach who kind of gave you sort of direction that you then almost like you walked back on because of these
Yeah.
same conversations that we're having now? For those unfamiliar, it relates to exactly this conversation where you've ended
Yeah.
up with this like cheap product really
Mhm.
compared to what you were going for. Do you want to share a bit of that experience?
Yeah, so I'll try to give a sort of short version of it. So I had been, I've been in business for myself, doing a version of coaching and consulting, whatever, for about 9 years full time. Prior to that, I worked in the entertainment industry. I ran digital marketing for the Oscars. I had a whole other career, but I've been on my own for about 9 years. Uh, and probably starting 4 or 5 years ago, I had started this kind of skill sessions membership model. I think when I first launched it, it was like $120 a year membership, and then it had gone up to 200, and then it had gone up to it was up to about like $350 a year. I had several hundred members. It was going pretty well. Um,
I was an
but
early
at this,
member, I just want to say.
yeah, I know Ellen's been around for a while. So you've seen the evolution, and so it was going well. Uh, but I always felt like I was like, this stuff's really good, and people love it. People renewed. The feedback's amazing, and I just felt like I should be getting quote unquote more out of it. Uh, Charging more members, just across the board. Like, and again, like everyone, you look around, you're like, that person's having six-figure course launches and that person has 10,000 students and I'm like, and I'm hearing from people, not just in my own mind, I'm hearing from people going like, your stuff is amazing. Like your stuff is way better than this, and so I had that sort of feeling of like, I don't know. I'm missing something. I'm doing something wrong. I'm undercharging, whatever. I had never had a business coach or anything like that. So about a year ago, I hired one. It was someone that I had sort of followed for years, had a podcast, really smart, good guy. By the way, everything I'm about to say, he is a really smart guy. He's a really good coach. It was very helpful. So none of this is a knock on him. I think it was a process that I had to go through. So I started working with him, and initially, like maybe the most beneficial thing was just initially he gave me this whole sort of questionnaire to sort of really make me think about and assess kind of like where I was at with my business and what I wanted and sort of all these things. And one of the things he came back to me with pretty early on was he was like, "Well, you're right. You're way undercharging. You're way undervaluing yourself. All this all this sort of other stuff." And one of the things that sticks with me the most in retrospect was I said to him that, I'm a big believer in giving value and content and sharing all the secrets and all this sort of stuff. And I said to him, like, one of the things that I hear over and over again from people is how generous I am. All these people use the word generous. You're so generous with your knowledge and and all this stuff. And I always kind of thought of it as a strength, right? And I remember he said, he's like, if they're telling you if everyone's telling you you're generous, it means you're charging too little.
Mm.
And it was a really interesting moment because my initial gut reaction to it was, I don't think I agree with that. Right. I always viewed sort of my generosity as kind of a core thing to all the success that I had, to the
Kind of like a
audience,
USP.
to
Yeah.
the sales, to the everything. And here's someone who's basically saying, that's not really a strength, it's a weakness. And I think I sort of thought about it and I was like, all right, well, maybe he's right. Right. And by the way, like I don't think he's necessarily wrong, but I kind of was like, I'm doing this whole thing, I'm pushing out of my comfort zone, I'm rethinking everything. Like maybe there's something to it. Not that generosity is a bad thing, but yeah, maybe I should be charging. I believe internally that my stuff is worth more and whatever. So so to make a long story short, coming out of like a couple months of working together, I decided to go more premium and sort of raise the prices on everything. The membership went from, I still had some people who were on like $120 plans. It was currently $350. And I went to, I kept raising it and kept realizing like, I'm not raising it enough. I would go like, oh, I raised it to this. And he'd be like, that's not enough. What are you doing? And, and it was just hard for like, again, like counterintuitive to do it. And it went to like $1,000 a year and it went to like $100 a month. And it went like, it just kept going up, up, up. And I rolled out some different products that were like 5,000 a year and this and that. And as I was doing it, I was also in some of those cases, probably in my own mind, maybe some insecurity, maybe some whatever to justify it. I was adding some sort of more high touch stuff, right? So it'd be 1,000 a year and we do a quarterly call and we do a, whatever. And it was working, sort of. Like there were new people coming in, and suddenly when someone joined, instead of getting $300, I was getting $1,000 and blah, blah, blah. Meanwhile, my calendar is starting to fill up with calls. And then I went so far, kind of the breaking point was I went to, up until that point, I had just raised the prices for new people. Then I decided, you know what? I'm going to tell all these existing people, yeah, you were paying $120. Now it's $1,000. I get it if it's not for you, but I'm repositioned myself as this more premium thing. See ya. So needless to say, some people upgraded. A lot of people were like, see ya. That's a that's a 10x price raise on existing customers. It's also interesting contextually. It's kind of the opposite of generous. So I went from sort of seeing generosity as a strength to being like, you know what?
No
Like
more generous.
right. They're not the right people for me anyway. And I'll have fewer people and whatever. And it was sort of working. Some people were leaving, some people were upgrading to the bigger prices, new people were coming in. I was seeing sort of revenue go up, but kind of in the back of my head, I was going, this doesn't, I said to you before the call, it felt like a short-term win that was going to be a long-term problem. Felt like fool's gold. Uh, And I also was conscious of, because I had added this additional work, this goes to the alignment of business model. I had kind of ruined my business model because all of a sudden now every person that was joining at these higher price points, I had to do calls with and I had additional work. So the ultimate scalability of I only do these skill sessions and office hours, that was out the window. So I was looking at it and I was like, this is working, but I only work with so many people in this way. And kind of what am I doing? And so after a few months of that, I kind of came to this crossroads where I was like, this doesn't seem like it's headed to a great place, right? Not just financially. Financially, I think it could have worked. This goes back to any business model can work.
Yeah.
But more so, I was like, this isn't what I wanted. Like the whole thing I loved about this was that I didn't have to do weekly calls and all this kind of stuff. And, and also the other thing was like there were members who I enjoyed helping, who loved my stuff, who I liked working with, who just couldn't afford the higher price points. And I was like, I don't think this is a good business where it's like I'm doing things that I don't want to do and I'm losing people that I like working with. Something feels off here. So I kind of pulled back. I had wrapped up working with the coach at that point, I think. And I kind of pulled back and I remember one night sort of like thinking and brainstorming the whole thing. And that generosity line really like stuck with me the whole time because I was like, it just feels so opposite to sort of who I am and what I believed and what I had done to sort of build my business up to that point. And I really felt like, I ultimately wrote a blog post, which we can share a link to called like, how I screwed my business up. I really felt like I had sort of screwed my whole, I'd spent years building this thing and then sort of just screwed it all up. Um, and so then when I started thinking about it, I thought back to the moment that I sort of raised the prices and started. And I asked myself this hypothetical question, which was not only what if I didn't raise the prices? What if I had actually lowered them?
Mm.
And I started to think about maybe I was right that there was something, that my business was not, something was missing. Like when I went to the coach and was like, yeah, I'm on whatever I would call sort of underperforming. I actually think that I was correct in that assessment. What I think though is in retrospect, instead of raising it, what if I had lowered it? And I started to brainstorm like, well, if I lowered it, because I have a big audience, right? I had like, whatever, a few, whatever I had, 300 some, 300, 400 paid members, but I had a newsletter of 30,000 people. So I was like, well, if I lower it, how many people are on my newsletter that haven't joined just because even 350 was too expensive? Or, whatever it is. And so I ultimately decided to go not just back to where I was and undo what I had done, but the other direction. And I decided to split the membership into two tiers. So I offered a $99 membership that was just the skill sessions training, and then a $299 membership that was skill sessions plus the office hours calls. Because I also realized a lot of people, because of time zones or whatever, they couldn't join the office hours calls anyway. So maybe I should just split those and give, so they're doing that. There's still a $300 option, but then have this $99 a year option. And in my mind, I was like, could I do this in a way that is an absolute no brainer for somebody to go for $99? There's 20 sessions in the archives already. I get the new one. Like, I literally wanted the people to go, this isn't a no brainer. And ironically, by the way, that is the exact phrase I get from people all the time when they join. Um, so I did that. And then I wrote this post, which again was titled sort of like how I screwed up my business, talked about everything I had done sort of in that journey, talked about what led me to now sort of go in the other direction. Went from, okay, maybe this guy's right. And maybe generosity means I'm not charging enough to no, generosity is going to be the foundation of my entire business. And I'm going to purposefully price things really low. And I'm going to continue to like, it has built me up to this point and I'm going to double down on it as opposed to sort of running away from it. And I emailed, hundreds of people who were members who had left because they didn't want to do the 10x price increase, apologized, said, here's what I went through. And now I'm going the other way. And you're welcome to come back at your previous rate, or you're welcome to come back at this even lower rate than your previous rate. The response to that was amazing, as you can imagine. Not everyone came back, but a lot of people came back. And since that point, which was probably maybe 6 months ago, maybe around the beginning of the year, it has given me an entirely different clarity in my business. It's working in terms of a higher volume of people coming in. It's made me realize lots of people coming in who are actually extra intrigued because they work in a field where they're not going to be able to charge a lot. For example, someone who's like target audience is independent musicians, and they're like, everyone's telling, all this advice out there is about charge more, go premium, go whatever. He's like, my audience is never going to be able to pay that. So here you are, not only charging less, but showing me how to build. And look, I show people how to build high-end businesses too, but showing me that like, oh, a business can be built on a lower ticket product. Um, and so that was really interesting and surprising and encouraging to see. Another thing that was really interesting was as part of doing this, I made more one-off coaching calls available. So whereas before it was like I would charge more and then promise you sort of a quarterly coaching call and my calendar would get all filled. I don't do that, but now I'm like, I even lowered the price of my coaching calls. A 90-minute call used to be $1,500. Now I charge 500 for a 1 hour call. Uh, and all of a sudden, guess what? All these people wanted to book 1 hour calls. So what I discovered was, yeah, someone might come in as a $99 member, but then they're buying a $500 coaching call and they're buying an ad or they're buying a couple coaching calls. And so all of a sudden, like the combination of more members coming in and upsells, if you want to call them that, or opportunities for them to pay me more is largely making up for the lower price points. And for me, it's made everything clear. Now it's still early, and we were talking before the call, and like, if I give you an example. Like I think last month I had $5,000 members from the previous year who were up for renewal. Well, I think four of the five renewed, but those four that renewed at like $300 or $150 if they had been an old time member as opposed to 1,000. So it's like just from those four people actually renewing, my revenue year to year on that four people dropped like several $1,000s. So I have a lot of new people coming in, but I'm in that stage right now where it's like, I said to you before, it's the opposite of how I felt before, where before I felt like, okay, short term, this is good, but it's fool's gold and it's going to end badly. Now I feel like short term, it's a little rough because I'm turning $1,000 members into $300 members. But long term, this is going to work because I think last month I had more new members join than I ever had before. I think I had like, I forget the number, but it was like 49 new members join in a month.
Amazing.
Um, which, my membership's around 400 people. So in a month,
Yeah.
in a month, the
And then
membership grew
if
more
that
than
continues.
10%. So,
Yeah.
so yeah, that's the long-winded story of sort of my journey.
I feel like it's like an online business MBA, that story. There's so much we can take from it, from a like business model perspective, obviously, personal brand, like reputation. How did you navigate that? Like going back on the coaching stuff, like it must have taken a bit of like vulnerability to go back out and be like, guys, I got this wrong. I've spent all this money with
Mm,
this coach and I'm just going to reverse it.
yep.
And then you're going to watch me see if I can put this back together. And I think that is part of your appeal is that you are just really transparent and you don't hold things back. And people had been with you for so long that they were like, really, I'm sure, so forgiving of all of those things. I think it was like, oh, wow, Josh is actually, maybe there's actually a more human component that comes out of that kind of interaction with you that wasn't available to people before and probably strengthened their interest in you as a
Yeah.
consultant as well.
I absolutely think so. And we talked before this call and you said, are you willing to talk about it? I was like, yeah, I'm open book and happy to be transparent and talk about all of it. And it was the response to sort of that blog post and that story was massive. And what's interesting is not only from people who knew me, but from people who were new to me and who discovered it and were like, whoa, like this is somebody who is, is not just sort of sugarcoating everything and is willing to sort of say, hey, I made a mistake and here's why and here's all that stuff. Which, by the way, I knew when I wrote that, right? This goes into sort of everything being strategic, right? I did it because it was genuine and I wanted to share it and whatever. I also knew strategically
Absolutely.
it was a really smart thing to do, right? I knew it was vulnerable. I think maybe even the first line of the post is something like, this is the most vulnerable thing I've
Yeah.
ever shared, right? I knew that people were going to want to see that. And that's the other thing, right? It brought everybody out. There were so many people who were like, oh, I had a similar experience with a business coach, right? Where they wanted me to do X, Y, and Z. I had a woman hire me uh, like on the spot. She booked a bunch of coaching calls with me. She's like, honestly, I'm working with this other coach. He's telling me similar. I don't feel comfortable about it. I feel like exactly where you were. And so, everybody could relate to it. And I think, that would be my advice for anyone, not even just in sort of, even in small ways, right? But like, being willing to sort of be honest and talk about your stuff and your thinking behind it and and all of that it does make you more human and but also people resonate with it and it draws them to you and they feel like, oh, that person understands, you know, uh, makes them trust you because you're sharing that not everything, you don't have all the answers and not everything works all the time. And all this stuff evolves as well. And I think the other thing that I like about it, which certainly happened with this, is that when you share stuff like that, that is when you're being completely sort of open and honest, whatever, and how you truly feel about things, what winds up happening is the people that it resonates are the ones that you would most want it to resonate with, right? Because, the person who is, and I don't have a lot of this in my audience anyway, they're not really drawn to me, but the person who's like just looking for the like sketchy, hacks and I just want to charge $1 bajillion and screw generosity and whatever, they're not going to resonate with that post. But I don't really want to work with them anyway.
Yeah.
So the other thing that happened was all the people that it resonated with were the right people, right? The people who were also like, yeah, I want to be generous in my business and I want to, all that kind of stuff. But I need to figure out how to do it. And so I think people seeing me uh, figuring that out or trying to figure that out certainly helped.
I would say like, yeah, it's not about keeping up with everything that you could be doing. It's like doubling down on who you are and what you're about. And you did
Mhm.
that with the generosity value, which you saw more in hindsight, that
Yeah.
jumped out to you for a really strong reason in that session. And then you were able to leverage that in your decision making going forward. And like, I just want to put a good word in for business coaches right now, being one, which is like
Yeah.
one of the things with a good business coach that you can get is that not just advice on paper, what sounds good, but that internal alignment of like gut check. How does this feel? What's coming up for you? It's something I spend a lot of time with clients. Does this feel good? And then next session, how is it resonating with you from last session? And often stuff's come up outside of the
Yep.
session. This didn't sit right for this reason, or I'm struggling with this. And sometimes I'm struggling with this as like childhood wounds, right? Which we
Hmm.
definitely don't have time to get into now, but it's so interconnected, all of these decisions
Yeah.
that we have to make often on our own. So when we get someone else to help us, it doesn't mean we're outsourcing decision making to them.
Yep.
It's about like combining their knowledge with our internal compass. So yeah, it's been really cool to watch where you've
And let
landed.
me let me just add to that because I'm glad you said that because I think it's also really important to point out, like, because I do think at times people can take the sort of wrong lesson from from my story. The just because the coach recommended I go this direction and I ultimately chose to go almost the opposite direction does not mean the coach was not helpful or was wrong. I actually, I do not regret at all hiring him and working with him. And I absolutely 100% think I would not be in the place that I am today had
Yeah.
I not done that. Right. He forced me to think about, consider things. And ultimately, I decided, he didn't force me to go that route. I chose to go that route and decided, wait a second, this is not the way that I want to go. But it was an inciting, it's interesting again. I had been running my business for years up until that point. but it was the inciting incident to sort of, even though took a wrong first step and then wound up having to undo it. I don't think I take that first step if I don't hire him as a coach.
Yeah.
And I don't think if I don't take that first step, I don't think I wind up where I am. I think I'm probably continuing to sort of spin my wheels. So I think I also think, again, his advice was not bad. It was good. It was really helpful. The sort of questions and everything it forced me to sort of think through in the beginning. And there were other things that came out of it that while they were not his, this clients from content niche messaging, which is super powerful and clear and resonates with people, I didn't have before the coaching thing. I didn't
Yeah.
get it from him. But in that process, I was like, oh, I need to do, it came sort of out of that and came to me as a result of sort of that work. Whereas before that, it was like, I was a little all over the place. I'll help you grow your audience and grow your business. And, didn't even really think about sort of considering myself a content strategist. Like I did a million different things. I was writing copy for, like, he definitely helped me focus or made me realize I
Yeah.
needed
Through
to
line.
sort
Yeah.
of do some stuff. And so yeah, I do coaching, you do coaching. So like yeah, it's funny because sometimes I want to make sure that people don't take that wrong lesson of like, oh yeah, coaching's not helpful.
No.
It's like, no, you got to have the right coach. And ultimately, even the best coach in the world, you got to figure it out. Their job is to sort of help you figure it out and help guide you.
Yeah. I always say, well, I don't say this, but I'm now thinking it. So I'm going to start
Mm-hmm.
saying it. It's like when you hire a coach, you're choosing to change. You don't
Mm-hmm.
necessarily know what the result of that change is going to be, or even what the change fully
Yeah.
is. You just know that something's not right as it wasn't for you. You have this gap, potential gap, and then you're going to figure
Yep.
out how to close that gap. And there might be wrong turns along the way. But half of that work is, like you say, it's on you because the coach can only do so much in that, like, what is it, 1 hour every 2 weeks? Like, there's only so
Yeah.
much you can give somebody that's going to change their situation. So I'm currently actually just working with a new business coach, and just
Mm-hmm.
sheer act of paying somebody quite a lot of money is
Mm-hmm.
making me go, right, let me sit down between these sessions and really map everything out, get my ducks in a
Yeah.
row. Like, I want to be so prepared for every session. So guess what? Like, I'm coaching myself
Yeah.
way more than had I not hired them. So yeah, I feel like we've come to time, which has been, it's just flown by. I've really enjoyed hearing this
Yeah.
really firsthand. I feel like I've had a little coffee with you virtually. So thank you for chatting.
Yeah. Thank you. Thanks for the excuse to chat. So it's fun.
Yeah, well, we're both share links and so on and so forth. What's the best place for people to find you? I'm going to just say your podcast, but it depends because you're a newsletter writer and a podcaster.
Yeah, I mean, any of those, again, I'm focused on the same thing on sort of all these platforms, right? So it's all talking, how to get more clients from your content. You can go to my website, joshspector.com. You can sign up for my newsletter there or at fortheinterested.com/subscribe. My podcast, Clients from Content, is on all the podcast platforms. My membership, if people want to check it out, joshspector.com/program. Um, and yeah, it's oh, and the other thing I would say too, actually, I should mention this. This goes right to this is another whole story, but this is another example of sort of, the now that I have embraced and become clear on like no generosity is my strategy. Now I see it and it changes how I do everything, right? So one of the things I'm doing is I offer a free skill session to people to check it out. So anyone that's listening to this, you can go to joshspector.com/list, and you'll see a list of all the sessions that I've done. Go ahead and email me, josh@joshspector.com. Just say, hey, I saw you on Ellen's show, and I would love to check out this session from your list. I'll send it to you for free. No strings attached. Just, want to help. Uh, and yeah, so again, it's funny. Like once I realized, like, oh yeah, like realizing it now and embracing it and owning it and going like, no, no, generosity is part of my strategy has actually taken it a step further that whereas before I was just kind of doing it naturally. Now I look at everything and go, okay, how can I use generosity to
10x
supercharge
that.
this thing?
Yeah.
Right. And it's like, oh, I know, maybe just give people a free session. And you know what? Number one, they're going to watch it. They're going to maybe love it and they're going to want to join the membership. It's happening all the time. So that's helpful. But even if they don't, they go, wow, what a generous thing. And I want to follow this guy's newsletter and I want to tell other people about him. And I like the goodwill that it brings. And it costs me nothing. They're all recorded.
Right.
Like, hey, do you want this? Like, obvious, right? But
No
not
brainer.
obvious before. Yeah, exactly. No brainer. Obvious now, but not before. So anyway,
Oh, excited for the next year or so to see how it continues to evolve. And
yeah,
yeah, excited to share this with our folks. So thanks again, Josh.
cool. Yeah, thanks, Alan.
Take care.
Bye.